Warhammer The Horus Heresy. Eidolon The Auric Hammer by Mark Collins. Chapter 4. Beneath the Skin. They delved into the depths of the great ship. Their force, like a sharpened blade, plunged towards the heart. Eidolon led from the front, as was his right and his duty, navigating by instinct alone. Pain sang in his skull, flaring bright and then ebbing away as he followed the ineffable path prepared for him. Every creak in his bones and sudden nerve spasm was an indicator, a soul-deep ache pulling at him, till the steps felt as though they were no longer his own. A powerlessness that he despised and yet was compelled to obey. Behind him came Malachris and Vociferon, while Plegua and one of his loyal cacophony brought up the rear. The other warrior was called Darwin, his lean face framed by vast sonic amplification engines, drowning him in the mechanisms of his own secret song. His gaze remained fixed ahead, his eyes pinned open, and his jaw held wide by steel bars.
"Bring me your finest,"
Eidolon had told Plegua.
"I need my faithful at my back."
Von Calder toyed with his Narthekium, processing the readings he had taken from Eidolon. In the interests of pursuing his avenues of research, he had practically volunteered for the duty, even though his capacity as equerry bade him to attend his master. He was no coward. His motivations were merely evolving, becoming more esoteric and self-serving. The corridors of the Wage of Sin had once been dependable, labyrinthine as any void ship, yet understandable by transhuman minds. Now they had grown strange, twisted by the corrosive touch of the warp. Doorways no longer reliably led where they should. Lights danced in the corridors in strange configurations, drifting from their lumen mounts to wander like corpse fires, luring in the unwary. Minor deviances, more annoyances than any true mockery. Eidolon did not doubt that these changes would only grow more intense as the hunt continued. Pillars heaved upwards, bracing the distant ceilings. Each one was no longer purely metal, but had slowly transmuted into living bone in places, threaded with questing capillaries. Eidolon reached out with one hand and brushed his fingertips along the living canvas, watching as the vessel contracted at his touch.
"Fascinating what the immaterial is capable of,"
he breathed.
"All things are remade by the Dark Prince's attentions."
Eidolon raised Gloria Eterna and let the power field cascade over the ivory surface. He could hear the pained screams of something, infrasonic, scouring at his awareness, scintillating his very soul.
"But this is my ship,"
he concluded,
"and the only hand that shapes it is mine."
The ship seemed to recoil at his words. Weapons were raised and the warriors fanned out around Eidolon as his speech echoed through the vastness of the space. Mine. Things moved in the shadows above them, made of liquid blackness that crawled and skittered along the ceiling. Clattering of their claws as they attained physicality sent rains of tiny sparks down over the gathered warriors. Lithe muscles contracted in the darkness, pushing them outwards, trailing tanned human leather and spikes of black metal. They looked down upon Eidolon with suddenly corporeal eyes, burning pinpricks set in the black sclerae of an oceanic predator. Ours. They purred as they moved, sliding and gliding down from the heights like descending angels, wrought from horror and wonder, every mortal dream and deviance given form. The handmaidens of the Dark Prince pivoted off the walls and landed around the knot of warriors in a loose circle. 6 of them stood before the Lord Commander Primus. The lead one, crowned in human bone and soft meat, bowed low before him. A crustacean's claw scraping against the decking. The sound made Eidolon's ears ache, a resonance so potent he felt it in his soul. "You are known to us. Souls sworn impacted. You belong to the prince who waits, the thirsting queen, they who are divine. God promised souls, eaters of the old enemy, destroyers of the new foe. The anathema's byblows returned to us."
"We are not yours,"
Eidolon said and laughed.
"You are merely the dregs of the Dark Prince. You who promise everything, and yet are nothing."
The Neverborn's face creased with amusement, and the sound it made was like the tinkling of tiny bells. Greater peals rang out behind them, with the rumble of distant thunder. Eidolon was aware, intimately, of the creature's transitory nature. It was a fleeting thing. ephemeral and unknowable, an echo of a greater godhead. He watched as it laughed, and as its face flowed from one visage to another. Here it was a bright young warrior, a youth in his prime, ready to raise spear and sword for its distant master. A flicker, and it was instead a nubile woman, her features speaking of a lifetime of pain and pleasure. A moment more, and it wore the painted face of a beautiful corpse, terrible and yet alluring in its androgyny. You could stand as a king in the sight of the gods, yet you preen at the foot of your father. The demon thing cajoled. You could be so much more than you are. What is terror when there are worlds yet unconquered? Do you not remember what it was to stand as a true master of war, instead of merely a demigod's bastard? It raised its claws, cutting at the air. I could show you, little princeling. I could show you the notes of the song you grasp for. I, Liadris, the singing blade that cuts with each caress, could help you follow in your father's footsteps. You need not grovel when the eternal chorus could sound across all. Eidolon swung his hammer, the weapon spitting fitful lightning as he heaved forwards against Liadris. The demon slid backwards, so fast it was a mere blur and a hiss of motion. Its sisters moved to replace it. A line of 5 chittering and cooing monsters, beautiful monsters, hideously delectable ruins of the mortal form, warped and twisted beyond human conception. Their claws flashed out, leaving bright contrails through the air as they sought purchase against arms and armor. Eidolon watched the power field flare, and sparks as the first strikes were turned aside. His own men were already moving, forming a protective cordon, stepping forward to aid their master. Von Calder stepped back, raising his pistol to fire. There need not be discord between us, princeling. Not when the Shattered King has such sights for you. Have you seen him in the mirrors of your soul? Does he yet whisper? Eidolon blinked away his surprise. He had thought whatever force pursued him was some figment of his father, yet now it had a name. The Shattered King. A petty and melodramatic title, redolent of the warp's excesses. Eidolon gestured, and his men answered the pronouncement with death and fury. The cacophony committed their twinned weapons in great sweeping arcs of devastation. Even as the demons dodged the sonic blasts, they tore through the cover. Pillars burst apart in clouds of iron and bone, stumps scouting ferrous blood into the air. The vast ceiling, distant and impossible, didn't sag as they tore the supports out from under it. The Neverborn capered and tittered as they weaved beneath falling masonry and the immense showers of gore. Eidolon pushed forward through the debris, smashing vast fragments aside with Gloria Eterna. Broken little monster, Liadris mocked. When we see your father, we shall sing the songs of your doom. We shall offer up the hymns of your delightful end. He shall know, soul severed, that you begged like a dog at the end, never to be consort or champion, but to die unmourned amidst the ashes of your ambition.
I will not die without setting foot on terror,
Eidolon hissed. He ducked the swipe of the claw and drove the hammer forward, narrowly missing the lithe demon. Liadris hissed and pivoted back, before its eye dissolved into tinkling laughter. Eidolon's strike had disrupted the artful asymmetry of the dance, blunting the arc of its graceful assault.
If the gods wish to stop me, then they should send better than mongrels such as you.
Liadris drove forward, screaming as it did. Blades of chitin and bone slammed against the head of the hammer, driving it down. He could smell burning flesh and the pungent musk exuding from every pore the thing possessed. He gritted his teeth and hefted the hammer up. Mortal and immortal strength clashed as everything burned and broke around them, yet there was only the moment. Eidolon had fought countless battles, commanding massed men and fighting alone. He had led warriors of the Third Legion into war across 100 battlefields, even before the betrayal had set them against their fellows. He had taken the time to guide cohorts of the Imperial Army, binding them to his legion in webs of respect and admiration. He braced as another rain of blows fell upon him. Seeking to dislodge his grip upon the hammer's haft, he felt blood well between the plates of his armor, staring back as the demon's assault finally found his flesh. It raised the crimson-smeared claw to its lips, and its long tongue gnarled around the chitin, lapping Eidolon's lifeblood. Weak, the demon blurbed. Will you fight as meekly against the anathema in his own palace? Will you falter at the first hurdle, buckle before the walls? Not a champion, not chosen. Simply chaff.
Be silent,
Eidolon snarled. He felt his collar rise, His throat bulged and he reared back, letting the demon's barbed claws clatter uselessly against the floor. Behind him he could hear his men fighting. He felt the surge of sonic force as Darwin finally succumbed to the enemy, his weapons screaming before his voice and song were silenced forever. Eidolon would not go gently. He would fight and rage against fate until the universe burned down around him. He was a Lord Commander, the Lord Commander Primus. No mere slave of the Dark Prince would shame him. Death is sweet, yet service can be sweeter. The king awaits. He waits and he hungers. You will be his. Your warriors shall bend the knee. Serve and be spared. Resist and your skin shall be our leather, your flesh our meat, and your blood our wine. His eyes flashed with raw amusement as he advanced upon Liadris. He kindled his fury, directed it, let it flood through him in a wave. Eidolon's jaw distended. The scream bubbled up through him, directed through his modified throat, yet resonating through every pore. Every part of him was alive with it, filled with it, fueled by it. The wall of sound drove Liadris back, screaming. It hurled the lesser demons from their feet and crackled the stones beneath their bodies. Malachus and Vociferon both staggered back, the blow rocking them but not overturning them. Von Calder swayed, more used to his master's abilities, moving his body between Eidolon and the demons. Only Plegua truly weathered the storm, unbowed by the display, invigorated by the power unleashed. Eidolon sprang forward, hammer raised, even as the demon spun back to meet him. He let it slip down, dropping the hammer to his side, feinting the blow. His fist, with all his rage behind it, clattering against the claws. Once, twice, 3 times. The chitin cracked. Liadris' eyes went wide with sudden surprise, and Eidolon smiled. He struck again, and Liadris tumbled back, hissing with pain.
Is this not part of your being? He taunted. You exult in inflicting it, and in bearing it. Why then is the agony I gift you not sweet?
Mongrel thing of flesh, Liadris snarled. Do you think you are the better servant? That the Dark Prince loves you more than us? He paused a moment, luxuriating in the sounds of blades as they tore through flesh. Vociferon and Malachus rallied at last, bringing claw and sword to bear against the demons. He let his eyes flicker to the plunging lightning-rimmed weapons as they cut and thrust. Plegua drove his boot into the chest of one and unleashed a murderous dirge, point blank from his great sonic weapon. The demon burst apart in a shower of immaterial viscera and glistening blood. One of its purple claws bounced away from its detonating body, still gouging at the floor as it struck the ground, over and over. Even in death the things fought, their very existence clinging to reality with a murderous tenacity that Eidolon could almost envy. You think yourself a prince of war, but you are nothing next to the shattered king.
Show me this king, and we shall test the truth of it.
Eidolon sniffed. He turned Gloria Eterna over in his hands and stepped forward, raising it above his head. He brought the hammer down. The lightning-wreathed head of it tore through Liadris' distorted skull, atomizing what passed for the thing's brain. Iridescent gore fountained into the air, spattering against Eidolon's warped pink armor, searing the plate into a spreading riot of non-colors where it landed. He let the hammer sink to his side and moderated his breathing. Eidolon's hearts hammered in his chest, pounding against his ribcage with the sudden rush of adrenaline. To kill was his purpose. That had never changed, not since his earliest days on Terra. As a warrior, he had fought and slain individually. As a company commander, he had learned what it meant to lead men, mortal and Astartes alike. Yet it was only as a Lord Commander that he truly understood and mastered that. Eidolon had turned battle into an art long before Fabius's transformities had infected them, long before Laren's salt caress had shaped them, body and soul, root and stem. He had fought and bled across the Emperor's expanding dominions, then followed their contractions as the Imperium sickened, shrinking back upon itself under the influence of its disloyal children. Then, as now, the only way was forward. Eidolon stalked past the gathered warriors and scowled as he turned, migraine pain flickering through his skull. Somewhere, in the recesses of his soul, something was laughing, making his body tremble with a distant and shared joy. Convulsions racked him as though his chest cavity was being shaken by applause, rattling his bones and making his heart contract and falter. He could feel it now, The squatting monster, the pressure presence that thrummed within his very being.
Enough games.
He growled.
We will find this shattered king, and break it so utterly that it will never dare to test me again.
I have to say, I really like that. I like the exploration of what it is for a ship to kind of be infested with demons, how their very presence alters reality around them. It was never quite... I never quite got that in Lords of Excess. But it's really interesting. I like seeing the demonettes. They were pretty fun. I don't understand why they always have crab claws, though. I feel like they could definitely do more than give them crab claws. Like, why crab claws? Who in Games Workshop decided that they had crab claws? It's so weird. I miss the old like 2003 demonettes where they could have knives and actual hands as well as crab claws. Actually, no, the claws weren't crabs. They were more needle-like. I felt like that was a lot more... I don't know, a lot more flavorful, having that kind of like needle-like kind of deal. But maybe that's just me. Who knows? Who knows, chat? But yeah, next video should be up soon. Sorry I wasn't able to get one out yesterday. I'm just tired after work. I've got lots of overtime coming up soon, later this week. So I'm going to kind of record as much as I can, and I'm going to try and record and edit as much as I can today, so I can try and get ahead of, like, what's coming up later in my life. I hope that you'll enjoy it. I'm really liking this book, honestly. It's very cool. It's very cool, like, seeing the different types of Emperor's Children, and the different forms of perfection. And the different forms of perfection that they pursue. Also, there's one thing I've noticed. People who write Emperor's Children, they really like their tongue twisters from time to time. Like, and their alliteration too. Both of these things. Wow. Yeah. Mwah.